Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, we want to thank the good folks at Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. Hey, and while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a new quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinator insects, both wild and managed, before they disappear. The magazine is full of beautiful photographs and informative articles from authors such as Dr. Marla Spivak, Dr. Mark Winston, and our very own Kim Flatham. Woohoo! Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kirsten Trainer from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with the number 2. Hey, Kim, recently we were able to sit down and talk with Dr. Julia Fine from the new Bee Lab in UC Davis.
A new Bee Lab. That's where I got my start, was at the USDA Bee Lab when it was in Madison. So I've been to all of them, but it's good. It's great to see another one opening up. And what I'm going to say, it's almost opening up on sacred ground out there. It's at UC Davis, right on campus, right next to Harry Laidlaw's lab, Norm Gary, all of the people that have gone through that place. So it's good to see. I'm glad there's a new one. They're looking at stuff that we need to look at in terms of nutrition and all of the things that they're going to be opening up. I think talking to Julia is going to be a good time.
I think, it was great, and I think isn't this one of the first bee labs to be opened up since Weslaco, right? Was there one? I can't remember now.
I don't remember the sequence of them opening up, but they haven't had a new one in a long time, and it's good to see them expanding again for a change.
Yeah, I think I was down at Weslaco right after it opened, because I remember walking up to the facility and they're still putting plants in the front garden around the building. Anyways, so it's almost February, or in February by the time this podcast is released. What should beekeepers be thinking about now? They're through the worst of the winter. Things are starting to poke up in some parts of the country. Crocuses, other little pussy willows. It's probably too soon for pussy willows. Anything?
Well, you mentioned Weslaco. I bet you they're making honey down there already almost. It's pushing spring. Up here, of course, it's still February, and winter's heavy hand is out there every day. But no matter where you are, the days are getting longer, the queens are getting active, there's going to be brood, there's going to be mites, there's going to be things you better be paying attention to. So the management part of keeping bees never goes away. And it's just what you're doing instead of not doing anything or doing something. So there's going to be mites, there's going to be food, there's going to be cold, there's going to be work to do.
Why is it always that there's work to do? There's got to be some point you just sit back and enjoy. All right, well, let's get into this interview with Dr. Julia Fine and find out about the new lab there at UC Davis. Dr. Julia Fine, welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast. We're happy to have you on the show.
Glad to be here. Julia's fine.
Oh, thanks, Julia.
It's nice to meet you, Julia. It's great to have another USDA honeybee research lab.
Nice to meet you, too. And yeah, it's really great to be out here in California.
Well, where were you before you were in California?
Most recently, I was a postdoc at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I was working in the lab of Professor Gene Robinson.
And what kind of research were you doing there?
So there, I was working to develop some techniques to study how different stressors affect honeybee reproduction, specifically looking at egg production. And I also worked to develop tools and techniques to rear the eggs that were produced by these experiments so that eventually we can hopefully evaluate how different maternal stressors might affect the offspring.
Mm. And what kind of stressors were you testing? Was it like chemical stressors, environmental stressors?
Well, most of my work was just to develop these techniques because, it was very novel type of work. But yeah, my background is as a toxicologist. So I did do a little bit of work testing agrochemical stressors on egg production.
Well, you're certainly have moved into an agrochemical challenged environment out in California. I foresee no lack of work for you down the road.
Yeah, I'm learning every day about the different challenges that beekeepers are facing, specifically in California. And of course, in California, we have the largest pollination event in the world that involves beekeepers from all over the country. So certainly everything that happens in California agriculture has an effect that is felt all around the country.
It certainly does. And it is a well-watched event every year. I want to say there's over 1 million acres of almonds being pollinated this spring, something like that.
Yeah, it's a number that's growing, I think.
Yeah, and at 2 colonies per acre, that means that every year they're going to need more bees out there, more bees and more beekeepers. So solving some of the issues that beekeepers and honeybees are facing is certainly becoming even more important.
You're working at the brand new Bee Lab. Can you tell us a little bit about the Bee Lab and what's so special about this one?
Yeah, so this one really is located in the heart of it. As we've mentioned, it's an area that's extremely important for beekeepers. California is sometimes referred to as America's salad bowl just because of all of the different crops that are produced here. But very generally, the purpose of this lab is to study and evaluate factors that contribute to the long-term success of managed honeybee populations. I think it's pretty common knowledge that managing honeybees has changed a lot over the past few decades just due to shifts in the way that bees have to be managed and new stressors that have been introduced or worsening, and also because of intensification of agriculture. And beekeepers have really not had the easiest time of keeping their colonies alive and functioning at the levels that they need to in order to provide pollination services to the growers of agricultural crops. Mm-hmm. So what this means is that our ability as a country to put nutritious food on the tables of Americans is at risk. And as ARS scientists, we are here to try to identify factors that contribute to colony loss or success and to develop tools and management practices that beekeepers can use to help promote the health and longevity of their colonies. So in a nutshell, that's our mission. And I realize that might sound a little bit vague right now, but really we're still developing our research programs here since we are very new.
When was the opening day?
Well, Arathi and I have been here for a while. I've been here for about 6 months. She's been here for maybe 3. The official ribbon cutting ceremony was on, I think it was January 7th. So that was last week.
You had quite a crew of people there at that ribbon cutting. members from the American honey producers, local commercial beekeepers, some of the USDA people, and some of the university people. I did a little digging. Where you are sitting right now is, from a beekeeper's perspective, hallowed ground. You're right next to Harry Laidlaw's lab. Norm Gary was there. Robin Thorpe, Rob Page. There's a lot of beekeeping. What's the word I want? History, beekeeping knowledge comes from your part of the world right now. I've been there and I've walked those grounds, and I'm envious of where you sit right now. It's a pretty neat place to be.
Yeah, it's really exciting to jump into research here at a place that has such a legacy for doing amazing honeybee and pollinator research. And we were really lucky with the ribbon cutting ceremony that so many people were able to join us. In particular, the stakeholder turnout was really awesome. We were really happy that we had a chance afterwards too to meet and talk with some of our stakeholders so that they could try to share with us what some of their concerns are and what some of their hopes are for our research and the directions that we'll be pursuing.
Well, what's the next step? What's the first thing you're doing this spring?
Well, I think we need to start learning more about agriculture in this region and about the challenges that our beekeepers are facing. So we're going to be trying to reach out to some of our stakeholders just to go see what their operations look like, how they're faring during almond pollination, but also we'll be trying to set up our own apiaries for our own experiments and trying to develop these relationships with beekeepers so that we can maybe work with them as we try and get some of our experiments off the ground.
That's pretty typical of the USDA labs, Beltsville and Baton Rouge and the rest of them that have good relationships with local and even distant beekeepers, people who move there for a while and then go back home, or people that are there for a while and go out to your backyard and pollinate almonds and share their experiences, their bees, and all of the things that they've done with the researchers at those labs. I'm wondering. You've got when you've got almonds blooming, you've got beekeepers there from, I'm going to guess, every state, or pretty close to every state. So you can reach out and touch people and say, okay, you've all experienced this same event. Now you're going to go home to Wisconsin and Minnesota and Florida and Texas, and your bees are going to be introduced to entirely different environments. What do these stresses, this similar stress, do in those different environments? I would guess that's something you'd be interested in.
Yeah, it's certainly not cut and dried when you're thinking of trying to implement different management practices. What works for one operation is not necessarily going to work for another, just because, every beekeeper runs a different operation, and yeah, they're going to be going off from California to experience completely different landscapes and different stress events. So yeah, it will be really good to try to make these relationships with people so that we can gather that data.
Jeff, have you been down in the almonds during blossom?
No, I haven't. It's one of my bucket list things to do is get down there with all the pollination going on, all the flowers, and take my camera for sure.
Have you been to the almond blossom, Julia?
No. When I arrived here, I missed the almond pollination event. So this will be my first year.
Well, you are about to have the experience of a lifetime from a beekeeper's perspective. It is it is an event not to be missed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It
should be fun. I'll be out there in early April. I will be up north at Oliveira's honey farm, and of course the bloom will be over, but California is always nice in April, before the long hot summer and after the long warm winter.
Yes, try to hit us up. Come say hello.
Well, if I can make it down there, I will. I would like to.
How many researchers will be at the new bee lab? It'd be you, Arathi, Dr. Arathi, and...
Yeah, Dr. Arathi Seshadri.
Mhm.
She is our lead scientist at the new Bee Lab. So what that means, it'll be me and Arathi, and we'll be running our own different research programs, but we will be working together to develop an overarching project plan. So as our lead scientist, she will be the one who's largely coordinating this.
And will you be working with other pollinators besides honeybees?
No, the focus of our lab really is on managed honeybees.
Well, that's good news.
Not that other pollinators are not important. I have to say that.
Yeah.
I think we can't ignore our native pollinators, but I think that largely what's good for honeybees, I think we hope to find will be good for native pollinators as well. So honeybees, I think, are the number one most important managed pollinator.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not to say that, others aren't important, but the way that our agricultural industry is currently structured, we really rely heavily on honeybees.
Definitely.
How big an apiary do you hope to set up?
I don't know. Arathi's the better person to ask about that, just because my work largely focuses on lab bioassays.
Well, I see a position opening up for a beekeeper out in your lab fairly soon.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Pay attention, folks. There's a job opening coming up in a nice part of California.
Yeah, thank you for that. So actually, we're hiring. I'm hiring a postdoc right now, so I am seeking applications for new PhD researchers on the market who want some experience. And I think, we will be hiring someone with some serious bee experience. That would be awesome.
Well, I think we'll be able to get your contact information up on our webpage when we post this, right, Jeff?
Absolutely. We'll have the lab website posted and Dr. Fine's contact information as well. Or if the job is posted, we'll get that link posted.
That would be great. Yeah.
So once you get up and running, and you've got some direction, and you've got students and the researchers going, I hope there's a chance we can get you back to visit again and give us an update on what you're finding and what you're still looking for.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
We've had several of the USDA people on here over the last year or so, and we're getting back to them this year to find out what they're doing. So we hope that you can keep us appraised of how things are going up there, especially after your first almond bloom. I'm going to guess that your what's the word I want? I'm going to guess that your appreciation of the American beekeeping industry is going to take a big jump after you see what goes on out there for 8 weeks.
Oh, believe me, it's already just jumping.
Well, it's good.
I've gotten to see some operations already, and I am constantly impressed.
Well, the other thing that you have right where you are is you've got, you can almost walk to a bunch of commercial beekeepers who raise queens. So you've got access to that too.
Yeah. I actually went out and visited Jackie Parks Burris operation. And that was a real treat because I had no idea how sophisticated and how serious it is out here. But yeah, I've been learning a lot. Well,
it's good. That's good. After a little bit of time, you'll be able to put that into perspective relative to the size of beekeeping operations, and then add in the stresses that these guys go through and their bees are going through. So lab work is good. Applying that to 10,000 colonies is a challenge.
Sure. I think, from my perspective, the reason that I like to focus on lab bioassays is because I think of honeybees as a superorganism, so their function relies on multiple systems working together and working together effectively. Unfortunately, it's hard to ask a colony, hey, how are you feeling today? Unlike a person, So if a person has an illness, like of a specific part of their body, like their digestive system, it can take time for this to really manifest. And it might not, for instance, kill them right away. But it doesn't mean it's not having an effect. And we can, ask people what's going on with them, but it's hard to do that with bees. So when I do lab bioassays, I like to try and use them to explore how stress is impacting very specific aspects of colony life, and then try to relate this to more applied studies.
It'd be really interesting to combine your work from the research standpoint, because you're talking about being able to talk to the colony, ask them how they're doing. Dr. Jerry Bromanshank at the University of Montana has the Bee app, the sound app, and combine what you're finding with the sounds that he's recording, and see if you can develop any meaningful correlations between the sounds and the effects of the stressors that you are determining.
Yeah, there are a lot of different tools that people are starting to develop for colony monitoring.
Yeah.
To try and get at these sorts of questions, to try and not just assess, sound, but also thermoregulation, to try and see if we can correlate this with different aspects of honeybee colony health.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. Definitely something I hope to investigate.
Well, you have to come up to Montana in July, where Dr. Bromanshank has a weekend set aside as part of the Western WAS meeting, and he's invited all of the monitoring outfits, companies, to be there in advance and demo their products. So all the monitoring products and vendors and developers, so that they can side by side and describe what they're doing. I don't have those dates in front of me. Kim, did you have those? It's July 14th or something.
8th, 9th, and 10th of July,
Okay.
Right before the WAS meeting on the weekend. It's the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday before the meeting. So it's this second weekend in July.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to get you hooked up, Julia.
Yeah, that'd be great. Sounds like a really cool event.
You can add to the vocabulary that Dr. Bromanshank is developing, listening to his bees.
We've talked about what you're doing and some of the things about the lab, but what about you and Dr. Arathi? What are you doing? What's your specialties, and exactly how are you combining them to benefit the beekeeper?
Right. So Arathi works a lot on nutrition, examining plant pollinator mutualism. And more recently, she has begun to explore some of the positive effects of plant compounds on honeybees, which is, I think, a quickly growing area of research. And I study how different stressors affect honeybees and reproduction and development. And I think more and more as we do large-scale studies of honeybee health, we find that nutrition makes an enormous difference on how bees can tolerate stress. Mm-hmm. So as a rule of thumb, I think usually natural and diverse forage is great for bees, but oftentimes that's just not available to them. So the idea would be to try and find different ways to supplement what they're eating that will enable them to deal with stress that they are absolutely going to be experiencing. So my hope is that eventually our work will be able to come together so that we can help to identify different strategies, like perhaps nutritional strategies that beekeepers can implement at various times to help their bees overcome different stress scenarios.
When you nutritional, when you're talking about the nutritional, is that in terms of probiotics, about fat versus protein versus carbohydrates?
Well, specifically, right now we're very interested in phytochemicals. So chemicals that plants produce naturally in their nectar and pollen, like caffeine or picoumeric acid.
I don't think anybody ever really thinks about that. I'm glad that you are. I never really, nectar's nectar, right? So from a beekeeper standpoint, that's just the stuff I get honey from. And so you're looking at you're breaking down the nectars from different plants and looking at what's in them. Is that a correct?
Yeah. So I have to say that there are a lot of different researchers that are looking at this right now. That's what Arathi was doing in Colorado State, and I think what she plans to continue to investigate at the USDA now. But there are, I think it's the Tucson lab is also investigating this. And I know that May Berenbaum at the University of Illinois has done a lot of work investigating the beneficial effects of different phytochemicals for honeybees. And I know there are plenty more people that I'm missing, but yeah, there's a lot of interest in this right now.
Very good.
I had a good talk with people down at Texas A&M recently. We were looking at the ratios of lipids and protein in pollen. Again, like Jeff said, something that pollen's pollen, right? Well, pollen isn't pollen. Some are a lot better than others. So all of these pieces put together, looks like the puzzle's coming closer to being put together, being solved. It's good.
Yeah. I think we have a lot of really nice information on the nutritional needs of a lot of different agriculturally important animals. So why should honeybees be any different?
We had a guest on just a couple of weeks ago and they're talking about, and they do large scale pollination, pollinator habitats. And they were talking about maybe using pollinator seeds between rows of trees and orchards and everything. I was wondering, that might be just kind of curious as you're getting started there and getting used to the almond orchards, if anyone's even thinking about, because that would increase, I would think, diverse the diet of the honeybees in the almond fields. Anyways, that's a long thing. I was just thinking.
There's stuff blooming in almonds right now, Jeff. Some of the growers have got things growing already.
Okay.
Yeah. For that reason.
Some of them, it is something that people have floated, that people are thinking about for sure. So, Kim, you've seen people already implementing this?
Yeah, there's some people, and I'm going to guess there's going to be more. I would like to see what those bees with and without those pre-bloom floral sources are like in July.
I think what some beekeepers do, if they plant those different hedgerows, are like they offer them a decreased rate for pollination services.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Healthier bees going in, healthier bees coming out. I don't have to spend so much to keep them alive. Yeah.
Well, very good. Dr. Julia Fine of the USDA-ARS Bee Lab in the UC Davis. So we really appreciate your time. I know you're busy getting things squared away there at the lab, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We look forward to having you back after the almond bloom.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been great. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, that was really good. I learned a lot about the new bee lab, and it's amazing with all of the activity that's going on in California right now and all the bees that are headed to California. This is the first and only USDA-ARS bee lab in California.
Yeah, Julia's going to find out the beekeeping industry in a hurry right now. There's going to be 2 million colonies of bees heading to her state, and 2/3 of the beekeepers are going to be out there. Commercial beekeepers are going to be out there, trying to keep them alive, trying to keep them healthy. And I got to tell you, Jeff, it was really good to see where the impetus to get this lab out there came from, and then the people who helped fund it. I mean, it just isn't all federal money. The American Honey Producers, the American Beekeeping Federation, the Almond Board, the California State Beekeepers Association, all those people kind of kind of put some of their differences behind them and said, okay, this is the big thing we got to do, and let's get it done. And now Julia and her crew are on the ground running. She's going to hit the ground running full speed like yesterday. So, but she's got good people out there that can give her a hand. She's got queen producers and honey producers and bee producers, and I see nothing but good coming out of this.
Yeah, it's an amazing assembly of people, and the research that she said that they're working on, I think, will benefit us all here soon. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask her, and I'll ask you now, having never been in California during the almond bloom, and you see these just hillsides covered with almond trees, all those blossoms. Is there a fragrance? Can you smell them? You look at it and you think. I think back of the orange orchards in Florida when you drive through and you could smell the orange blossom. The almond blossoms have.
There is a little bit of when you're in a right underneath 1,000 trees. There's a little bit of a fragrance I noticed when I was out there, and it's just a hint of bitter. It's not a real fragrant. It's not unpleasant. But yeah, there's a fragrance out there, and when it's calm and there isn't a breeze, you can smell it. It's well, you need to get there sometime and experience it, because there's nothing in the world like it. No place in the world like it.
Well, maybe we need to plan, probably not this year, but maybe next year, taking the show on the road and go visiting some pollinators and some growers and processors out in California for a series of shows.
You know, the other thing I want to do is in the almond orchards is there are people out there now that are looking for ways to pollinate almond trees without bees, and they're using drones, and they're dropping pollen, and they're using other techniques, putting pollen in sprayers and spraying the blossoms with the solution that has pollen in it. And you gotta hand it to the almond growers. It's CYA. If all the problems that bees are having, what happens if we don't have bees? Well, I got to have something in the background that says, okay, I can still pollinate my almond trees. But so the beekeepers need to pay attention to this also, and we're going to be looking at some of these. I was talking to Kirsten the other day about her next issue of her magazine, and we're going to be exploring. There's more than one way, and there's more than one crop that are looking at pollination with mechanical pollination, not using bees. So,
wow,
yeah,
I don't. I'll be honest. I don't know how I feel. I have mixed emotions about that. the techie geeky part of me says, "Wow, way cool," and the other part of me says, "No, I don't like that."
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what becomes of all of that.
Yeah. The techie part, you're exactly right. Here's a heck of a challenge. How can I solve this? At the same time, every tree that gets pollinated by a drone is a tree that didn't get pollinated by bees. So there's some beekeeper out there looking for another tree, and it's going to be fun to watch, but maybe not fun to watch. I don't know. But
yeah, I was going to say, you have a weird sense of fun. I don't know. Oh, boy. So we have coming up in February our promise series of special shows on beginning beekeeping.
Well, you're right. Our series on beginning beekeeping is coming up, and you know who's joining us, Jeff.
Well, why don't you let everyone know who's joining us?
We got Dr. Jim Tu is going to be part of the show for this series, and maybe more afterwards. He's looking at his schedule and seeing what he can do. And we've got another sponsor coming up for this series. Better Bee out in New York is going to be one of our sponsors for this too. So they're going to have a part of this. Jim too is going to be a part of this, and you and I, and beginning beekeeping. And I got to tell you, the challenge of explaining how to keep bees without being able to show how to keep bees is, for me, a real challenge. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's going to test us all for sure, and just to let listeners know that the desire for this course, and anybody who's a beekeeper, even sitting at the coffee shop or wherever, someone finds out you own bees, and you'll always have someone come up and say, "I've always thought about getting into bees. how do I do that? What's involved? What does it take? And so the purpose of our series of podcasts in February will be what does it take to become a hobby beekeeper? What does it take to get started in bees? What are the things they need to consider? And we'll just kind of provide that high-level information and provide some guidance where they can take their next steps.
I think your comparison to two people sitting in a coffee shop, me trying to explain to you how do you get started keeping bees, is a good analogy in terms of what we're going to do, because it's a challenge, but if you do it right, that person leaves that coffee shop on their way to a bee store to buy their equipment. So I think we'll get that done right.
Yeah, and I'm excited that Jim too will be joining us, and he will become a regular, if not a frequent, if not regular contributor and member of the Beekeeping Today podcast with Kim and I. So it's going to be a good season coming up, and we're looking forward to it.
Should be fun, Jeff.
You bet. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. We want to thank this episode's sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And while you're there, give them a shout out for sponsoring this great show with Dr. Julia Fine. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener. We wouldn't be doing it if it weren't for you. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kim?
I think that about wraps it up, Jeff.
All right. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.